Welcome back to Saturday Agenda. We'll cross to Canberra now for our political panel, and joining us is the political editor of the Sunday Telegraph, Samantha Maiden. Thanks for joining us, Sam. And also from the Australian, Lanai Vasek, who's one of our reporters in the Canberra Bureau. And Lanai, you've been in the thick of the protests down at the Tent Embassy and at the front of Parliament House in the last couple of days. Can you give us a sense of whether there was much genuine anger there and just how organised the protests were?
Yeah, look, there was lots of anger down there, right from the 15-year-old girl who burnt the flag yesterday all the way through to the elders that were there. They were all very angry, and it did get pretty hairy down there at times. It was quite scary, and there definitely was a lot of anger. What's
your take on Tony Hodges' environment, the Prime Minister's staffer? Did you see him down there? Have you heard he was seen down there? Who was he talking to? Just how closely involved was he in what went on?
Look, I didn't see him down there, but there were people down there that were telling me that he got a coffee at the restaurant and he'd walked past the Tent Embassy with a coffee and relayed that information. So, I mean, I didn't see him down there, but there were definitely people who were down there saying that they did see him.
Samantha Maiden, what's your take on this? Do you think, in your experience, that someone like Tony Hodges could have just done this on his own without involving or speaking to anyone else in the office about it? And what do you think he would have been trying to achieve?
Well, I think there are clearly more questions that need to be answered because the statement that the Prime Minister put out doesn't really explain to us who the mystery third party was that Tony Hodges disclosed information in relation to Tony Abbott. It refers to a call, so it suggests in terms of the statement that it was a phone call rather than a face-to-face interaction, although certainly there were eyewitness reports from the site of Mr Hodges, talking to people that were there, and there was some speculation that the disclosure may have happened at that point. There would be a question, of course, of whether Mr Hodges was asked to disclose the information or encouraged to disclose the information, but it's also possible that it was a more casual thing. We don't know that yet, and I suppose that's why I think the Prime Minister's office will have to release more information about what has occurred here. In any case, it's an open and shut case that to disclose the location of the Liberal leader in this sense is a security breach, it's a security risk, and the events of the day showed, why that is so dangerous.
Indeed, it's more than just a minor matter that some of the spin doctors are trying to pass off at the moment. I mean, Lanai, this is someone playing with racial politics, if you like. It must have been very obvious down there that things could get ugly.
Exactly, and I mean, the protesters or the people at the Aboriginal Tent Embassy were angry and riled up right from the beginning of the day. So, I mean, to disclose the location of a political leader when it was so close to where the Tent Embassy was, I think, was irresponsible.
Samantha Maiden, you would have been aware that I think there was some pretty ordinary media coverage that day. There were online reports verballing Tony Abbott, saying that he wanted the Tent Embassy dismantled or torn down. We have to expect, don't we, that this would have been the message that Tony Hodges gave to the protesters?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that we do have to be honest about the fact that there were mistakes made all along the steps here. I think that it is clear that Mr Abbott's original comments were misunderstood. He talked about the fact that we needed to, quote, move on from what we now know to be what he was suggesting was the debate we've had in the past. He didn't in any way suggest that the protesters should be moved on. But that is what the media reported, erroneously, wrongly, and then it was later corrected. And in a sense, again, we don't know because we haven't got the full information, but in a sense it's quite likely that Tony Hodges was working on that misreporting by the media when he passed on the information that, again, we don't know exactly what he passed on to the mystery third party that then made its way to the Aboriginal Tent Embassy. So, you're right. I mean, the media has made mistakes in this instance as well.
I will get your thoughts on another week, Samantha and Lanai, about the year ahead and whether it's going to be as shambolic as last year. But given that it's been such a sad week in many ways and such an ugly week in Australian politics, I do want to finish the program by looking at a little speech that Anthony Albanese, the Infrastructure Minister, gave earlier this week. And we'll look at the tape now.
In Australia, we have serious challenges to solve and we need serious people to solve them.
We have serious problems to solve, and we need serious people to solve them.
Unfortunately, Tony Abbott is not the least bit interested in fixing anything.
Bob Rumson is not the least bit interested in solving it.
He's only interested in two things: making Australians afraid of it and telling them who's to blame for it.
He is interested in two things, and two things only: making you afraid of it and telling you who's to blame for it.
Samantha Maiden, do you think that Anthony Albanese will get a pair from Parliament to go to the Oscars this year?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's just a debacle. And, Anthony Albanese said he's never seen the movie and he didn't put those words in his speech, but it's really neither here nor there.
Now.
Oh, exactly, and it was just, look, it all just fed into a week where, the Gillard government looked like shambles. And he handled it well with humour, and he was quick to fess up, and I think in that way he really quarantined the government from something that would be even more humiliating. But look, it was just another example of the government, I suppose, in this instance being let down by its staff.
Yeah, I think I feel some sympathy for Anthony Albanese. I think he's one of the government's hardest workers, best performers in the Parliament and outside. And obviously, he wouldn't have approved of this sort of plagiarism. As you say, I think a staffer has obviously written this, probably knowingly. Lanai, Vasek, in a week when we've seen one staffer sacked, I thought surely whoever wrote this speech ought to be packing their bags as well.
Yeah, I think it was quite courageous or generous of Anthony Albanese to say that it was a joint effort, to not single out his speechwriter and potentially sack him. But it was obviously a very embarrassing gaffe. And, I mean, if you're making a speech to the National Press Club, I don't think you should be plagiarising well-known movies.
Indeed. Well, thanks for joining us today, Lanai, and also thanks to you, Samantha Maiden. We'll speak to you another week on Saturday Agenda.
Thanks.
And that's all we have today in the first program for the year. Look forward to your company throughout the year as we see what unfolds in what, as I say, is promising to be just as shambolic, just a vitriolic year as we had last year, of course, with leadership tensions in the government and the opposition continuing to push, as we heard from Tony Abbott, continuing to push for an early election. Speak to you next week.